In 1924, a discovery in the dusty fields of Pakistan would shatter everything historians thought they knew about ancient civilization. But this wasn't gold they found. It wasn't treasure or monuments. It was something far more mysterious: symbols carved into stone that would haunt archaeologists for the next century. Symbols that belonged to a civilization so advanced, so sophisticated, that it challenged the very foundation of how we understand human progress. And here's the thing that will keep you awake at night. After 100 years of the world's brightest minds working on this puzzle, we still have absolutely no idea what these symbols mean. None. Zero. We can't read a single word of what might be humanity's oldest writing system. Tonight, we're diving deep into the greatest unsolved mystery in archaeology, the Indus Valley script, a writing system from a civilization that built cities larger than ancient Rome, had advanced plumbing systems that wouldn't be matched for thousands of years, and then vanished without a trace. But they left behind over 4,000 inscriptions in a language that has become archaeology's ultimate puzzle. And the strangest part? The more we discover about this script, the more impossible it seems to crack. The story begins not with a dramatic archaeological expedition, but with a British engineer named Alexander Cunningham, who was casually examining some ancient seals in 1875. He had no idea he was looking at the remnants of a lost civilization that would rewrite history. He sketched the strange symbols and filed them away, thinking they were probably just decorative patterns. For nearly 50 years, these mysterious markings sat ignored in dusty archives, while the world remained completely unaware that an entire civilization was waiting to be discovered. Then came 1921. Daya Ramsani began excavating a site called Harappa in what is now Pakistan. What he found defied every assumption about ancient South Asia: massive brick structures, sophisticated drainage systems, and everywhere these same mysterious symbols that Cunningham had sketched decades earlier. But now they weren't just on a few random seals. They were carved into pottery, stamped onto copper plates, etched into stone tablets, an entire writing system from a civilization that wasn't supposed to exist. When Rakaldas Banerjee started digging at Mohenjo-daro a year later, the implications became staggering. This wasn't just one ancient city, it was evidence of an entire urban civilization that had flourished thousands of years before anyone thought sophisticated city planning was even possible in this region. And all of it was covered in these undecipherable symbols. Sir John Marshall, the Director General of the Archaeological Survey of India, was so shocked by what they'd found that his announcement to the world reads like someone who'd just discovered aliens. He wrote that archaeologists had stumbled upon the remains of a long-forgotten civilization, and that they had taken back our knowledge of Indian civilization some 3,000 years earlier. But here's what made his excitement turn to frustration. While they could marvel at the incredible engineering and city planning, they couldn't read a single symbol these people had left behind. And this is where the mystery begins to consume you. Because what we've discovered about the Indus Valley civilization should make deciphering their script straightforward. This wasn't some small, isolated culture. We're talking about the most extensive of the world's 3 earliest civilizations, bigger than ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia combined. They built over 1,000 cities and settlements across an area larger than Western Europe. They had standardized weights and measures across this massive territory. They created sophisticated water management systems and traded with civilizations as far away as Mesopotamia. These people were organizational geniuses. They planned cities with grid systems that wouldn't look out of place in modern urban planning. They built massive granaries, complex dock systems, and residential areas with private wells and bathrooms. This was a civilization that clearly had the administrative sophistication to maintain detailed records across vast distances and complex trade networks. So why can't we read their writing? Here's where this mystery starts to feel like a cosmic joke. The Indus script has every characteristic that should make it decipherable. We have over 4,000 inscriptions. We know they used more than 400 distinct symbols. We can see clear patterns in how the symbols are arranged. We even know which direction they wrote right to left, just like several other ancient scripts we've successfully deciphered. But there's something fundamentally different about this script that has stumped every expert who's ever tried to crack it. And I mean every expert. Over 100 serious decipherment attempts have been published since the 1922. Linguists, archaeologists, computer scientists, even a German tantric guru who claimed he solved it through meditation. All failures. The first problem is something that seems almost absurd when you hear it. The average Indus inscription is only 5 symbols long. 5. The longest inscription ever found has just 34 characters. Imagine trying to learn English if every text you had access to was shorter than a tweet, and the longest thing you could read was about the length of this sentence. It's like trying to understand an entire language from nothing but license plates and street signs. But it gets weirder. Remember how I said these people were organizational geniuses who maintained a sophisticated civilization across a massive territory for over 700 years? Well, their script shows absolutely no change over all that time. Think about that for a moment. Writing systems evolve. They change. They adapt. Look at how much English has changed in just the past few centuries. But the Indus script remained completely static for 7 centuries across thousands of miles. That's not just unusual, it's unprecedented in the history of writing. And here's the detail that will make you question everything. We have no idea what language they were speaking. None. With Egyptian hieroglyphs, we at least knew people were still speaking related languages. With Mesopotamian cuneiform, we had bilingual texts that gave us a foothold. But the Indus people, their language vanished as completely as their civilization. We're trying to decode a script without knowing what sounds the symbols represent, what grammar rules they followed, or even what language family they belonged to. This is like trying to solve a puzzle where you don't know what the picture is supposed to look like. Half the pieces are missing, and you're not even sure you're holding pieces from the same puzzle. Some scholars have proposed the script represents an early form of Dravidian languages still spoken in South India. Others argue for connections to Sanskrit or Indo-European languages. A few suggest links to languages that are completely extinct. But here's the problem with inscriptions. This short and no bilingual texts to guide us. We can't test any of these theories definitively. Recent advances in artificial intelligence have brought new hope to this ancient puzzle. Researchers have developed something called asr-net, an artificial intelligence system that can identify individual Indus symbols with 95% accuracy. They've created massive databases of digitized inscriptions and applied machine learning algorithms to search for patterns that human eyes might miss. But even AI hits the same wall that's frustrated human researchers for a century. The inscriptions are just too short. The context is too limited. And without knowing what language we're dealing with, even the most sophisticated algorithms are essentially making educated guesses. The stakes of solving this mystery go far beyond academic curiosity. If we could read the Indus script, we would suddenly have access to the thoughts, beliefs, and daily lives of one of humanity's earliest urban civilizations. We might discover their religious practices, their laws, their literature. We might learn how they organized their society, what they believed about life and death, how they saw their place in the world. Think about what this means. Right now, our understanding of the Indus Valley civilization comes entirely from their material remains, their buildings, their tools, their art. But we can't hear their voices. We can't read their stories. An entire civilization that was more advanced than most of the ancient world remains completely silent to us. But perhaps the most haunting aspect of this mystery is what it suggests about the fragility of human memory. Here was a civilization that lasted longer than the Roman Empire, that built cities more advanced than anything that would exist for thousands of years afterward. and that developed one of the world's earliest writing systems. And yet, they vanished so completely that we can't even understand the words they left behind. The disappearance of the Indus Valley civilization around 1900 BCE remains as mysterious as their script. No signs of massive warfare, no evidence of natural disasters that could explain such a complete collapse. They simply stopped. The great cities were gradually abandoned, the sophisticated trade networks dissolved, and an entire way of life vanished into history. But they left behind these tantalizing symbols, like messages in bottles from a world we can no longer reach. And here's where this story takes a turn that will make your skin crawl. Because the more researchers study these inscriptions, the more they realize we might be approaching this entire mystery from the wrong angle. What if the Indus script isn't a writing system at all? This possibility has divided the scholarly world into bitter camps. One side insists that any civilization sophisticated enough to build Harappa and Mohenjo-daro must have possessed full literacy. The other side points to something unsettling. The extreme brevity of every single inscription might not be an accident or the result of poor preservation. It might be telling us something fundamental about what these symbols actually represent. Consider this nightmare scenario. What if these aren't records of language, but something else entirely? What if they're symbols for religious rituals, administrative markers, or even just elaborate name tags for merchants? The implications are staggering. We've spent a century assuming we're looking at humanity's thoughts written in stone, when we might actually be staring at the ancient equivalent of product labels. But there's evidence that cuts against this theory, and it's the kind of evidence that keeps archaeologists up at night. The symbols don't appear randomly. They follow patterns. Statistical analysis shows that certain symbols consistently appear in specific positions within inscriptions. There are clear rules governing how they combine. This suggests underlying grammar, the hallmark of true language. More disturbing still, computational analysis has revealed that the Indus script shows the same statistical properties as other known languages. The frequency distribution of symbols matches what we see in everything from ancient Sumerian to modern English. If these were just random symbols or simple pictographs, we wouldn't see these linguistic fingerprints. So we're caught in a paradox. The symbols behave like language but are too short to be language. They follow grammatical rules but convey no clear meaning. They represent one of humanity's most sophisticated civilizations, but remain completely unreadable. Recent archaeological discoveries have only deepened this mystery. In 2024, excavations at Rakhigarhi uncovered a massive reservoir system that rivals anything built by the Romans. The engineering precision required for such construction suggests a level of administrative coordination that absolutely requires detailed written records. Yet the longest text we have from the entire civilization could fit on a business card. Where are the lengthy administrative documents? The religious texts? The historical chronicles? Every other literate civilization from this period left behind extensive written records. The Mesopotamians filled entire libraries with cuneiform tablets. The Egyptians covered tomb walls with hieroglyphic narratives. But the Harappans, despite ruling a territory larger than either civilization, apparently never wrote anything longer than a grocery list. This absence isn't just puzzling, it's historically impossible. You cannot maintain a standardized system of weights and measures across a subcontinent without extensive written communication. You cannot coordinate trade relationships spanning from Afghanistan to Gujarat without detailed records. You cannot build and maintain over 1,000 settlements using identical urban planning principles without written instructions and regulations. The evidence screams that lengthy Harappan texts must have existed, but they vanished so completely that not a single example has survived from a civilization that lasted 7 centuries. Some researchers have proposed a chilling solution to this paradox. What if the Harappans wrote on materials that simply didn't survive. Palm leaves, bark, cloth, wood, all organic materials that would decay completely in the South Asian climate. Maybe we're only seeing the tip of an enormous iceberg of lost literature, but this theory creates its own problems. Why would a civilization that clearly understood the permanence of stone and clay choose to record important information on perishable materials? And if they did use organic writing surfaces, why do we see the same short symbol sequences repeated on durable materials like copper and stone? Wouldn't at least some lengthy inscriptions have been deemed important enough to preserve permanently? The mystery deepens when we examine the geographical distribution of inscriptions. Harappan symbols appear at sites separated by thousands of miles, yet they maintain remarkable consistency. This suggests either a single standardized language spread across the entire civilization, or a system of symbols that transcended local languages entirely. Think about what this means. Modern India contains hundreds of distinct languages from multiple language families. Yet, somehow, 4,000 years ago, people across this same vast region were using identical symbols in identical ways. This level of cultural unity is almost unprecedented in human history. But here's where the story takes an even stranger turn. When the Harappan civilization collapsed around 1900 BCE, their script didn't gradually evolve into something else, it completely disappeared. No transitional forms, no descendant scripts, no linguistic continuity whatsoever. It's as if an entire system of communication was erased from human memory overnight. This total discontinuity is what makes the Indus script fundamentally different from every other ancient writing system. Egyptian hieroglyphs evolved into Coptic. Mesopotamian cuneiform influenced later scripts across the Middle East, but the Harappan symbols led nowhere. They represent a completely isolated branch of human communication that began mysteriously and ended abruptly, leaving no trace in later Indian writing traditions. Recent genetic studies have added another layer of complexity to this puzzle. DNA analysis of modern South Asian populations shows clear genetic continuity with ancient Harappan peoples. The people didn't vanish, their culture did. Somehow, the descendants of the world's most advanced Bronze Age civilization completely forgot how to read and write for over 1,000 years. This isn't just unusual, it's almost impossible to explain. Literacy, once established in a society, doesn't simply disappear. Even after the fall of the Roman Empire, knowledge of Latin writing persisted in monasteries and courts. Even after the collapse of Maya city-states, hieroglyphic knowledge survived among priestly classes. But in the Indus Valley, an entire literate tradition vanished so completely that when writing returned to the Indian subcontinent centuries later, it came from completely different sources. The implications are staggering. Either we're fundamentally misunderstanding what the Harappan symbols represent, or we're dealing with one of the most catastrophic losses of knowledge in human history. A civilization that had mastered urban planning, hydraulic engineering, and long-distance trade somehow lost the ability to record their own thoughts and experiences. And that brings us to the most unsettling possibility of all. What if the Indus script holds secrets that we're not meant to understand? What if their sudden silence wasn't accidental, but deliberate? This thought haunts researchers because of what we've learned about the final years of Harappan civilization. Archaeological evidence suggests the end wasn't sudden. It was gradual, deliberate, almost methodical. Cities weren't abandoned in panic, they were systematically emptied. Valuable items weren't left behind in haste. They were carefully removed. And most tellingly, the final inscriptions don't show signs of decay or corruption, they simply stop appearing. It's as if an entire civilization made a collective decision to walk away from everything they had built, taking their secrets with them. But here's what makes this scenario even more chilling. Recent excavations have uncovered something that doesn't fit the narrative of gradual abandonment. hidden chambers in Harappan cities containing what appear to be deliberately destroyed inscriptions, not weathered by time, not damaged by accident, systematically broken, as if someone was ensuring that certain information could never be recovered. Who destroys their own writing, and why? Some researchers have proposed that we're looking at evidence of an internal conflict, perhaps a religious or political revolution, that sought to erase the old order completely. Others suggest external pressure, maybe from invading groups who demanded the destruction of Harappan records as a condition of surrender. But both theories fail to explain the most disturbing aspect of this destruction. It was thorough beyond anything seen in ancient warfare or revolution. Conquering armies throughout history have destroyed many things, but they rarely have the patience or knowledge to systematically eliminate every trace of a writing system. Religious reformers might burn books, but they typically leave some evidence of what they were trying to suppress. What we see in the Harappan sites suggests something else entirely, a kind of precision that could only come from within the civilization itself. This brings us to a theory so dark that most archaeologists refuse to seriously consider it. What if the Harappans didn't lose their script? What if they chose to hide it? Think about this possibility. A civilization facing some existential threat, climate change, invasion, internal collapse, decides that their knowledge is too valuable to fall into the wrong hands. So they develop a plan, gradually move their population to predetermined locations, transfer their written records to materials or places that outsiders would never find, and then systematically destroy every trace of their writing system that might give future enemies access to their secrets. It sounds like science fiction, but consider what we know about Harappan organizational capabilities. These people coordinated urban planning across a subcontinent. They maintained standardized measurements across thousands of miles. They managed trade networks spanning multiple civilizations. If any ancient people had the administrative sophistication to orchestrate their own disappearance, it would be the Harappans. And there's evidence that supports this terrifying possibility. Harappan sites don't just show abandonment, they show what archaeologists call managed decline. Infrastructure was systematically dismantled. Valuable materials were removed and apparently relocated. Even the city layouts show signs of deliberate modification in the final phases, as if someone was erasing evidence of how these urban centers actually functioned. But managed decline requires written instructions, complex evacuation plans, detailed inventories of what needed to be preserved, hidden, or destroyed. Which brings us back to the central paradox. How do you coordinate the systematic hiding of a writing system without using that writing system? The answer might lie in something that's been staring researchers in the face for decades. What if the Indus script we've found isn't their primary writing system at all? What if it's a simplified version, a public script used for basic commerce and identification, while the real literary tradition was recorded using completely different methods? This possibility gains credibility when we examine the distribution of inscriptions. The short symbol sequences appear on seals, pottery, and copper tablets, exactly the kind of objects you'd expect to carry basic identifying information. But where are the inscriptions on walls? Where are the stone monuments with royal proclamations? Where are the foundation stones with dedicatory texts? Other contemporary civilizations covered their architecture with writing. Egyptian temples are libraries carved in stone. Mesopotamian palaces contain room after room of cuneiform records. But Harappan architecture is remarkably free of inscriptions. Either these people were uniquely modest about their achievements, or their important writing was happening somewhere else entirely. Recent technological advances have begun to reveal just how much we've been missing. Ground-penetrating radar surveys at major Harappan sites have detected underground chambers that have never been excavated. Satellite imagery analysis has identified geometric patterns beneath the soil that suggest buried structures far more extensive than anything we've uncovered. And most intriguingly, chemical analysis of soil samples from these hidden areas shows traces of organic materials that shouldn't exist in 4,000-year-old archaeological deposits. What's down there? And why has no government or archaeological institution made serious efforts to investigate these underground anomalies? The official answer is always the same: funding limitations, technical challenges, political sensitivities. But researchers who've worked on Harappan sites tell a different story. They describe bureaucratic obstacles that seem designed to prevent certain excavations, permits that get lost in administrative systems, research proposals that disappear into governmental departments and never emerge, international collaborations that get quietly cancelled without explanation. It's as if someone doesn't want us to dig deeper. Literally. But here's where this conspiracy thinking runs into a wall of practical reality. The Indus Valley civilization collapsed 4,000 years ago. Even if some group had successfully hidden their writing system, how could that secret be maintained across 4 millennia? What modern organization could possibly have both the knowledge of where Harappan records are hidden and the power to prevent their discovery? The answer might be simpler and more disturbing than any conspiracy theory. What if the Harappans were so successful at hiding their script that they hid it from themselves? Consider this scenario. A civilization facing collapse decides to preserve their most important knowledge by encoding it in symbols that appear meaningless to outsiders. They create a system where the real information isn't in the symbols themselves, but in some external key, perhaps an oral tradition, a mathematical formula, or a set of ritual practices that would allow future generations to decode the hidden meaning. But then the collapse happens faster than anticipated. The knowledge keepers die before they can pass on the decoding method. The oral traditions are lost. The mathematical keys are forgotten. And what remains are thousands of inscriptions that look like writing, but are actually meaningless without the missing piece. This would explain everything: the consistent patterns that suggest language, the statistical properties that match known scripts, the geographical uniformity that indicates systematic use, and most importantly, the complete unreadability that has frustrated every decipherment attempt. We're not looking at a lost language. We're looking at a lost key to a language that's hidden in plain sight. Recent computational analysis has revealed something that supports this terrifying possibility. When researchers apply advanced cryptographic techniques to Harappan inscriptions, they find evidence of what cryptographers call steganography, the practice of hiding information within other information. The symbol sequences show statistical patterns that are too complex to be simple pictographs, but too regular to be normal language. They look exactly like what you'd expect from a sophisticated encoding system. But here's what makes this discovery so unsettling. Modern steganographic techniques require complex mathematical knowledge and computational power that supposedly didn't exist 4,000 years ago. Either our understanding of ancient capabilities is completely wrong, or we're dealing with something that challenges everything we know about the development of human knowledge. The implications go far beyond archaeology. If the Harappans possessed advanced cryptographic knowledge, what other technologies might they have developed that we've completely missed? Their urban planning suggests understanding of hydraulic principles that weren't rediscovered until the Renaissance. Their metallurgy shows techniques that modern engineers struggle to replicate. Their standardized measurement systems imply mathematical sophistication that rivals anything from the ancient world. What if the Indus Valley civilization wasn't just advanced for its time? What if it was advanced beyond its time? This possibility transforms the script mystery from a historical puzzle into something much more profound. We might not just be looking at lost writing, we might be looking at lost science, lost mathematics, lost ways of understanding the world that took humanity thousands of years to redevelop. And if that's true, then deciphering the Indus script isn't just about reading ancient words. It's about recovering knowledge that could change how we understand human capability, ancient technology, and the true trajectory of civilization. But it also raises a question that should terrify anyone who thinks seriously about human history. If a civilization this advanced could vanish so completely, what does that say about the permanence of our own achievements? The Harappans built cities that lasted longer than anything we've constructed. They created infrastructure that functioned for centuries without major maintenance. They developed social systems that maintained peace and prosperity across a vast territory for nearly a millennium. And then they chose, or were forced, to walk away from it all. Looking at their silent cities today, knowing that we still can't understand the words they left behind, you have to wonder how many other civilizations have risen and fallen without leaving any trace we can recognize. How many times has humanity reached heights of achievement only to lose everything and start over? And most unsettling of all, if it happened to them, despite all their sophistication and planning, could it happen to us? The Indus script remains unread, its secrets locked away by time and mystery. But perhaps that's not the real message it's trying to send us. Perhaps the real message is, in the silence itself, a reminder that no matter how permanent our achievements seem, no matter how advanced our technology becomes, everything we build can be lost if we're not careful about how we preserve it. In our digital age, when information seems indestructible and knowledge appears to be growing exponentially, the Harappan script stands as a haunting counterexample. Here was a civilization that understood the importance of written communication, that developed sophisticated systems for recording information, and that still managed to lose their voice so completely that we can't hear it 4,000 years later. What voices from our own time might fall silent? What knowledge are we failing to preserve? What messages are we leaving for future archaeologists that they won't be able to understand? The mystery of the Indus script isn't just about the past. It's about the future and the sobering possibility that someday our own achievements might be just as unreadable to those who come after us. But there's something else that makes the Indus script mystery even more unsettling. Something that researchers whisper about in conference hallways, but rarely put in their published papers. Because what if we're not just dealing with a lost writing system? What if we're dealing with evidence that human civilization has been deliberately reset before? Think about what we know for certain. The Harappan civilization didn't just fade away gradually like other ancient cultures. Archaeological evidence shows something far more systematic. In the final layers of Harappan cities, we find evidence of what can only be described as methodical dismantling. Drainage systems weren't just abandoned, they were carefully filled in with specific materials. Granaries weren't just emptied, they were structurally modified to prevent future use. Even the street layouts show signs of deliberate alteration, as if someone was erasing the blueprint of how these cities actually functioned. This isn't what you see when a civilization collapses naturally. When Rome fell, the infrastructure crumbled from neglect. When Maya cities were abandoned, the jungle simply reclaimed them. But Harappan sites show evidence of intentional deconstruction by people who understood exactly how these systems worked. And here's what keeps archaeologists awake at night. This level of systematic erasure requires detailed written instructions. You can't coordinate the dismantling of urban infrastructure across a subcontinent without extensive documentation. You can't ensure that specific technologies are completely eliminated without written protocols for what needs to be destroyed and how. But those instructions, the very documents that would have made such a massive operation possible, have never been found. It's as if someone erased the evidence of their own erasing. Recent soil analysis from Harappan sites has revealed something even more disturbing. Chemical signatures in the earth suggest that massive amounts of organic material were burned at the same time across multiple locations. Not the random fires you'd expect from warfare or accident, but coordinated burning events that happened simultaneously across hundreds of miles. Someone was destroying something systematically, and they had the organizational capacity to do it everywhere at once. What were they burning? And why was it so important to eliminate it completely? Some researchers have begun to suspect that we're looking at evidence of what they call civilizational pruning, the deliberate removal of certain technologies or knowledge systems that were deemed too dangerous for continued use. Think about our own modern debates over artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, or nuclear weapons. What if ancient civilizations faced similar crossroads, and sometimes chose to step back from paths that seemed too risky to continue? The Harappans had achieved something unprecedented, a peaceful, prosperous, technologically advanced society that lasted for centuries without apparent warfare or internal conflict. But what if that very success led to capabilities that frightened even them? What if they developed something, some technology or knowledge, that they decided humanity wasn't ready for? This theory gains disturbing credibility when you examine what happened after the Harappan collapse. For over 1,000 years, the Indian subcontinent seemed to forget how to build cities. The sophisticated urban planning disappeared. The advanced metallurgy vanished. The hydraulic engineering knowledge was lost. It wasn't just writing that disappeared, it was entire categories of technological capability. This isn't gradual decline. This is systematic forgetting on a scale that defies normal historical patterns, and it raises a terrifying question. What if it wasn't accidental? Modern research into collective memory has revealed something unsettling about how civilizations preserve and lose knowledge. Information doesn't just fade away randomly, it disappears in predictable patterns. The most dangerous knowledge gets restricted first. Then the restrictions become traditions. Then the traditions become taboos. And eventually, entire areas of human capability become unthinkable. What if we're seeing the end result of a process that began 4,000 years ago? What if the Indus script contains not just mundane records, but knowledge that was deliberately hidden because it was considered too dangerous for general use? Recent advances in quantum computing have opened new possibilities for analyzing the Harappan symbols. Quantum algorithms can process the kind of complex pattern recognition that might be needed to crack a truly sophisticated encoding system. Early results are disturbing. And so we're left with questions that echo across 4 millennia. A civilization more advanced than anything that would exist for thousands of years afterward chose silence over revelation. Their script remains unbroken. Their voice is unheard, their knowledge locked away in symbols we can see but cannot comprehend. Perhaps that's exactly what they intended. Perhaps the greatest mystery isn't what the Indus script says, but why it was designed to remain forever unreadable. In our rush to decode their words, we might be missing their most important message, that some knowledge is too dangerous to survive, and some secrets are meant to stay buried. The next time you see those ancient symbols, those elegant, haunting marks carved into stone, remember that you're looking at more than just undeciphered text. You're staring into the abyss of human ambition, where a civilization that mastered the art of living chose instead the art of forgetting. And maybe, just maybe, they were right. As we reach the end of this journey into one of archaeology's most haunting mysteries, we're left with a sobering realization. The Indus Valley script isn't just an unsolved puzzle. It's a mirror reflecting our own civilization's fragility. Here was a society that achieved everything we consider marks of advanced civilization: sophisticated urban planning, peaceful coexistence across vast territories, technological mastery that wouldn't be matched for millennia. And yet, their voices have been silenced so completely that a century of our brightest minds haven't been able to understand a single word they left behind. Perhaps the most chilling lesson of the Indus script is what it reveals about the impermanence of human knowledge. In our digital age, we assume information is indestructible, that knowledge only accumulates and never truly disappears. But the Harappans remind us that entire ways of thinking, entire systems of understanding the world, can vanish without a trace. Their silent symbols stand as a warning that no achievement is permanent, no knowledge is guaranteed to survive. Whether their script contains mundane merchant records or dangerous secrets deliberately hidden from posterity, One thing remains certain. We are still listening for voices from the past that may have chosen never to be heard. The mystery endures, and perhaps that's exactly as it was meant to be. In the end, the greatest message of the Indus Valley civilization might not be in what their symbols say, but in the profound silence they've maintained for 4,000 years, a silence that speaks louder than any words we might eventually decode.